George Leslie Mackay and theater. For a start, you don't have to read much about Mackay to know that he was a very dramatic character, perfect for theater. One of the first books about him, published in 1923 by the Presbyterian Church in Canada, he's told that he had piercing eyes. We're told that he had determination, that he was a mystery, that he was every inch a soldier, that he had a fiery temperament which sometimes led him into difficulties. His zeal many times overcame his judgment. He could never retrace his steps or accept defeat. He seldom, if ever, met a person on whom he did not leave a lasting impression. If we look at the sources for Mackay, besides that 1923 book, most plays about Mackay draw on his autobiography, From Far Formosa. They draw on his personal writings, letters, and journal. They draw on The Island Beautiful, that book published in 1923, celebrating 50 years of the Presbyterian Church in North Formosa, which was just been republished in translation by Presbyterian Church in Vancouver, who I thank very much. So there's that Mackay with his piercing eyes, his dramatic presence. He's what these versions of himself on stage are all about. We can't look at every version, but we could look at the National Opera production in Taiwan from 2008, The Black Bearded Bible Man. We can look at a stage production with a lot of music, sponsored by the Mackay Foundation, Stories of Mackay, Taiwan's Son-in-Law. We had looked at a musical produced by the Shengtai Christian College, which is in Zhongli District, west of Taipei. And we'll look at an anime version, The Blackbeard Barbarian, and a production produced in Embro in 2018, which has the distinction of being the only one of the ones we'll look at, which was produced and conceived in Canada. I should say that Mackay may be very dramatic, but there's lots about his life that is important, but doesn't find itself in theater or in anime. He was very famous for producing carrot, tomato, broccoli, collard, celery for the first time in Taiwan, but vegetables aren't dramatic. You don't find them very often mentioned in plays about Mackay. What you do find in plays about Mackay and in all drama is a certain set of basic characters that it's really hard to have drama without these characters. From left to right, there's some sort of hero, a warrior figure perhaps, with you can see him on the left with that beard that Mackay very deliberately copied and used as a means to build his own mystique. Besides the hero, there's a heroine, as you see in the second slide. There's a villain, as in the third one. The fourth one is a stock character of a wise advisor, often elderly, but not always more experienced than the hero. And fifth, there's almost invariably a clown. There are other characters, but these are the standards. Presentations of Mackay usually start with the fact that he came from Canada and went to Taiwan. The National Opera Company's version had a quite extensive scene set on the sea trip. Mackay singing. Ahua was also on that trip in their production. The Son-in-Law of Taiwan stories spend a considerable time on his journey. Here he is in that standard iconic guise with his valise. Puppet show can do sea voyage as well. In the Embro production, a lot was made of it because, as Mackay records in his journal, he was frequently sick. He had a terrible time in the voyage. He was not a natural born sailor. It helps build up his heroism, his sort of epic warrior sailor image. His arrival in Taiwan is really highlighted in his own journals, and it's very dramatic too in some of the presentations. In The Son-in-Law of Taiwan, a lot is made of his arrival and being absolutely charmed, as well as horrified by the conditions he was seeing on his arrival in northern Formosa. The Embro play had him admiring not only the scenery, but the people, and being horrified by opium addicts and drunks and other challenging aspects of Formosa. But he dedicates his life to this country, for its beauty, its people. And that can be a very dramatic scene in a play too, and was. Almost all of the presentations make a lot of the fact that he had to learn the language. And this was really a heroic battle in some presentations. Often a lot of comedy is made out of his brilliant strategy to befriend local people and their language from them, including buffalo herders. And here they are in a puppet presentation, in a manga presentation, in the opera with the watch scene, in the opera where he's meeting children for the first time, and at first they're hiding behind the hats. You see two more in the foreground hiding within little hiding places on the set. This was the Emperor Productions version of the Buffalo and the Buffalo Herder Boys. That production made a lot of the fact that there are, in the language he was learning, 50,000 written characters, and he learned, as he said in his journal, about 100 a day. There was a video of the characters swooping and morphing above his head in that production. Ahua is usually portrayed as some sort of experienced, wise advisor. In the National Opera production, he was tenor. Mackay was the baritone. Usually the tenor is the hero, which gives you some sort of idea of the stature that he was accorded in that National Opera production. Here he is in the puppet show, in the Son-in-Law of Taiwan show, here with a globe where he is in the classroom advising Mackay as to how to proceed. Another shot at the classroom production, Ahua, the second from the left, to the other side, Mackay, Minnie's grandmother on the far left, and a comic servant on the right. In the manga, the anime version, it's Ahua's idea to use malaria and tooth pulling to save lives and win converts. In the Embro production, a lot was made of Ahua and how he came to challenge Mackay in the various debates, as they're both learning about the language and culture and religious faith of each other. It also presented a scene in which Mackay is having his own epiphany version and coming to accept the Christian God creator as his God. The episode of Pulling Teeth seems to show up in pretty well everything ever produced about Mackay in narrative form. The manga version. Now, it may be painful, but it's also comic in pretty well every production. It's hard to do tooth pulling in complete serious dignity. Even puppet Mackays can pull teeth with their pliers. That's Ahua looking on or holding on to the patient who's in the lower left. Mackay in the Son-in-Law of Taiwan pulling. That production had him pulling teeth also in a clinic set up in the classroom. The Embro production also made it a comic event, which also led to converts. The heroes in most plays are warriors of some kind, not necessarily in a war sense, but in the sense of having to engage in some conflict to achieve their ends. Often in traditional Asian theater, the warriors have the black beards that we associate with Mackay. And as a warrior, he's confronting various opponents, quite violent opponents, often enemies of Christian mission in Taiwan. Their weapons are swords, they're stones, they're burning down churches. There's an episode with thugs in the Son-in-Law of Taiwan version. The puppetry can also show us the warrior facing almost unsurmountable odds. The National Opera had several war scenes very dramatically presented, expensively presented, I might say, as well. The Emperor production tried to make quite a bit about not only Mackay, but many, as you see on the left, and Ahua in the hat behind. During the Sino-French War, Mackay in one scene being led blindfolded to the French military commander, to plead the case that his churches and his worshipers be protected. The treks through the mountains and among various hostile landscapes and environments were also very dramatically presented in most of the work I looked at. Mackay, the servant, Ahua, and many heading through the mountains in this version. This is the Embro version. Some characters are forming mountains over which Ahua and Mackay have to climb. In the National Opera production, a lot was made of the glamour, if you like, the spectacle of traditional Formosan culture that Mackay had to confront. In the puppet plays too, there was much made of colorful processions of that culture that Mackay is there to challenge and in his view, improve or convert. Presenting Aboriginals, which were a big part of Mackay's mission, is also something that was a challenge for producers of Mackay narratives in theater and elsewhere. Aboriginals can be presented as both noble, friendly characters and also as hostile characters. This becomes a bit difficult nowadays, at least in Canada, where we're very sensitive to portrayal of our Aboriginal characters. In the Son-in-Law of Taiwan version, here they are being attacked in the mountains by Aboriginal, they being Ahua and Mackay. Another aspect that's complicated is idol burning. We think of it as a bit, if not bigoted, at least insensitive or hostile to traditional beliefs of the cultures that a Christian missionary would be encountering. They're presented as superstition in the puppet play. There's this gibberish on the part of the priest on the right who's consulting or presuming to consult, pretending to consult an oracle about a client's son's sickness. It's presented as foolish. The Embro play presented this as puppetry, a shadow puppet, if you like, criticizing not so much the religious faith of believing in spirits, but the corruption behind it, where the priest would ask for money in return for allegedly curing a family illness. That production made much of bringing idols to be burned. On the right is a convert bringing the family idol. This causes great conflict, you would think, in every family, and a lot was made of this in the Embro production. Mackay is presented as not being opposed to burning the idols, and this was simply Presbyterian doctrine to him.
Question 47. What is forbidden in the first commandment?
The first commandment forbiddeth the denying or not worshiping and glorifying the true God as God and our God, and the giving of that glory and worship to any other, which is due to him alone. He's so God and heaven, he's such as we will.
You can see that the favorite hymn, "The Gates of Hell Will Never Prevail," ties in very nicely with the burning of the idols. Mackay is simply quoting from the Shorter Catechism to justify that total rejection and destruction of idols. This caused conflicts, of course, within families, and much was made of that in the Embro production, with the mother on one side cursing her daughter in the middle with the idol. There must have been a lot of drama at the time about this, the splitting of families. And much was made of that in the Embro production, not so much anywhere else. There's got to be a comedy in any drama, or any drama that's traditional. We've mentioned the tooth pulling. Mackay himself doesn't seem to have any sense of humor at all, but that doesn't prevent there being comedy and dramas about him. Often it has to do with confusion about language. In the son-in-law production, Mackay says, "Thank you," and the clown interprets this as "no-ku," and there's much confusion there. The clown figure recurs all through the son-in-law production. The puppet version has a rather drunken restaurateur who becomes a clown character. And there's confusion again about Mackay's use of language, getting his intonations wrong, and leading to comic confusion about meaning. The children throughout the scenes with Mackay learning, and the Buffalo children can be presented as comic characters too, as in this child who's fallen off a swing. A lot can be made about Mackay's courtship and his bride. Often a lot is made of the rather Cinderella aspect of it. You see Minnie on the right here kneeling in rags with the duck, her abusive stepmother overseeing her. This from the son-in-law of Taiwan version, there's the abuser on the right, again, Minnie crouched in despair. In some of the versions, she's rescued, if you like, or protected by the grandmother. In the left here, again, you see the grandmother bringing Minnie to school to meet Mackay, and on the far right, Ahua. In the Embro production, a great deal was made of the children, and some of the comic school lessons. School can always be funny. Kids who can't recite or learn very well and are sort of comically stupid versus Minnie in the middle there in her rags, who nevertheless is by far the most distinguished student. A lot what can be made and is sometimes made about love at first sight or the building love relationship between Mackay and Minnie, as here in the schoolroom in the Son-in-Law of Taiwan musical play. A lot can be made about the opposition, the vehemence, the cruelty, if you like, of the stepmother, who here is being persuaded by Ahua to allow Minnie to marry the foreign barbarian. A lot can be made, and was made in the Emperor production, about a building relationship between them. She, after all, is 17, he's 34. He's never shown any interest in being a romantic character. There's a huge difference of ethnicity and age and culture between them. And this has to be confronted, surmounted, and it can be very tender as this relationship developed. The relationship between them, because it's of two different cultures, can be a real source of drama as they overcome their differences and come to what you always hope for in drama, which is true love. A lot was made of their love relationship in the National Opera production as well. The wedding can be a source of great spectacle, as you see here in the anime version, the Son-in-Law of Taiwan, the puppet version, another part of the puppet version, the Embro production. Anything you can do to build up Minnie is good for drama. It's good for historically acknowledging what a marvelous character she was. In the version of Son-in-Law in Taiwan, she accompanies him into the mountains. She's interpreting for him with other tribes. She also, in this scene, has to win over her father, who's a bit skeptical. She's there in the mountains when they're attacked. There she is on the right, and she bridges the two cultures in a way that none of the others are able to achieve, not even really Ahua. In the Emperor production, she is prepared on stage for the wedding. And then later, a lot is made of her as a teacher, instrumental in the establishing of the girls' school, teaching the girls. Here she is in the classroom. A lot was made of her winning over the Presbyterians of Canada. In this scene, there on the right, in the Mackay tartan, is Mackay's mother. And Minnie, as you see in the left, in the high Victorian costume, has come a long way from the Cinderella rags of early scenes. She wins over not only the mother, but there she is in the Mackay tartan herself, winning over church people wherever she goes. She is also one of the co-presenters on Mackay's dramatic and always capacity crowd presentations of their mission in Taiwan. The production in Canada made a lot about Canada. The anime version shows them both preaching in Canada, but Canada gets pretty short shrift in most productions. In the National Opera production, scenes set in Canada, like this deathbed scene where Mackay is remembering Canada, show not anything like Zorra, but the Rocky Mountains, because I suppose that was the traditional image for the Taiwanese audience of Canada. It gave highlight to his mother, but did not really show Canada itself. The Emperor production had two stage sets. This one, which shows typical of Zorra scenery, the fall scene on the right, a typical barn of Mackay's period on the left. It made a lot of Mackay's growing up. Here he is pushing a rock in a field, showing that strength of character and determination that he has, while two other kids are much more interested in going fishing. That production had a excerpt from a service where the characters spoke in Gaelic with the translation above, because that was the formative event in Mackay's life, or one of them, the Sunday worship. His mother had the opportunity to teach him about his Scottish heritage and the expulsions of the Highlanders from Scotland, from Sutherlandshire. They were presented as the villainous Duke and Duchess of Sutherland in the masks, the two in the middle there. There was also a lot of conflict in Canada in that production between Mackay and the Presbyterian Church in Canada Foreign Mission Committee. They ended up being a bit comic, but their misunderstanding of Mackay, their skepticism, caused a lot of conflict for him, which comes very clear in his journals. He said in one stage that they were simply in the Ice Age. A lot was made of his trips around Canada. That production tried to show him on train cars and stages and sleighs, bouncing around the rough roads, trying to get to every church he possibly could to spread the message that the crowds were desperate to hear. In the Amber production, a lot was made of the raising of funds for Oxford College. Each production, each day, a local dignitary, religious or political, played the premier of the province, Oliver Mowat, bringing honor to Mackay and Minnie. All productions made a lot of the fact that Mackay remained in Taiwan, grew old there, and died. Here they are as an elderly, loving couple in the puppetry version. In the son-in-law of Taiwan version, she's sewing a new outfit for him. The manga anime version shows them with their first son. But Minnie is present at his death. This is the last scene in the opera. Most plays tend to end with the marriage and the happily ever after, but so much more in Mackay's life happens after his marriage that it's important to dramatize. The puppet play made a lot of his death and dying. Here he is, his spirit on the left, leaving the bed as the mourners look on in the son-in-law of Taiwan production, and his spirit leaving from the deathbed as a dove, a bird in the National Opera production. And in the Emperor production, again, his death was the final scene. Well, that's a brief view. At the end of the Emperor production, the choir sang the hymn Forever with the Lord, and presumably that's now where Mackay is. But we don't have forever. We only had half an hour to show Mackay in theater, a brief glimpse of how he can be portrayed. And I thank you for listening.